Hello, and welcome to Everyday Business Solutions. We are the business podcast that you should be listening to. Why? Because we provide everyday business solutions in our weekly podcast. And for our April mini season, we've brought on the wonderful guest, Jill Badger. She's the director of the Small Business Development Center, part of our Toledo Area Chamber of Commerce, and also a free resources to businesses across the nation. And for our mini season, we're talking about developing small businesses and everything that you need to know before you start yours or to get yours back on its feet. So all you need to do is sit down, sit back, and get ready to listen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our mini season of Everyday Business Solution. And I have with me today Jill Badger. Jill Badger is part of the Toledo Regional Chamber of Commerce, I'm trying to say it right, and then the Business Development Center and the Small Business Development Center. So we brought Jill on today because as we're shifting forward in this time, we're seeing a lot of people embark on their entrepreneurial dreams or starting a small business or taking a small business that already exists and taking it to the next level where it's becoming like a brick and mortar or it's becoming more set. And there's a lot of things to being in that place where even if you're in a place where you're starting to take over, you're starting to change location or doing things like that, there's a lot of things to consider. And so Jill is going to help us really break down what her organization does for small businesses and then those things that we really need to consider we have in place as you're moving forward as a leader in today's world. So Jill, if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you. I'm Jill Badger with the Small Business Development Center at the Toledo Regional Chamber of Commerce. The Small Business Development Center is a national program in all 50 states. In Ohio, we have 30 centers or so. Ours at the Chamber covers Lucas and Wood County. But we are a no-cost center. You do not have to be a chamber member in order to utilize our services. We help anyone that is considered a small business, and under the SBA, that's like under 250 employees, so it covers quite a few businesses. With anything from being a startup with an idea on a napkin to being second or third generation and you need assistance getting some sort of financing. We help a lot of people try to figure out, do you want to be a sole proprietorship, LLC, an S Corp, figure out how to get your EIN number or a vendor's license. Sometimes we will go out to locations and help you figure out if this is the right place to put your business. We are not attorneys, but we will look at leases with you and try to help you understand if this is something that's normal or if you need to seek an attorney to look over those fine print and make sure you're signing something and you understand all the legalities to that. But coming to us prior to signing that lease or purchasing that building is always a good idea, just to have somebody else with an opinion, point things out that maybe you haven't thought about in the past.
So when do you typically see businesses actually come to you?
In all stages. I mean, I've gotten the people who have already signed the lease and now they want to start their business. I have people who just have an idea on a napkin and want to do every single step with us. It varies. I have third generation business owners that want help doing strategic planning, or they're new to marketing their business. Like they've always had customers and they've never really had to solicit for them. So now they need help figuring out a sales plan. Sometimes it's as simple as just helping them find the right banker to get a new piece of equipment. It varies.
It's kind of cool to see that they are actually making use of you throughout different stages of the business life cycle versus just at one. I'm really curious as far as we've obviously seen a lot of shifts and changes in the last year, and it's literally been just over a year now since this whole mayhem with the pandemic and shutdowns and everything else started. Have you seen an increase in people who have utilized your service?
Yes. It feels like at least double the amount of clients we usually see in a year. And part of that is brand new businesses, like you said, are people that have either been laid off or chose not to go back to their 9-to-5 job that have decided to take a hobby and turn it into a business, or people who were in business for themselves for years but are trying to figure out how to survive the pandemic. They may have done really well to start, but now we're, like you said, a year in. So supply chain is difficult right now. Understanding how to fill out PPP or EIDL or any of the federal loan programs, grants that are out there. They just don't know what to do, how to do it, where to find it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of those things, I think, when some of the stuff started happening, they were talking about, okay, we're getting loans, we're doing all this stuff. It was a huge question of, okay, well, how do I make use of it? And a lot of it was directed towards small business. But then you were hearing about, like, more of the franchisees and companies like that making use of it because they had, like, corporate coming in and they could train and give advice and they had the information. But a lot of small businesses were, like, in the dark.
We've tried to do a lot of marketing to let people know we're out there because people still don't know we exist. So finding us can be a challenge. But once they do, we've been able to help with all those different loan programs, grant programs, stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems, I think, too, when we get into, running a business or our day jobs and we're really focused, it is hard to sometimes see even the resources that are right around us. So I could understand how that would get hard.
Well, and some people just don't want to ask for help. Like, I'm the entrepreneur, I'm the head of this company, I should know how to do this. Not realizing that, one, it doesn't cost them anything to ask a question, and two, because we're part of the chamber, we're one of the only SBDCs nationally that are located in a chamber of commerce. We have over 2,000 chamber members at our disposal. So if somebody asks a legal question, I can usually get an answer fairly quickly for them. If they ask an HR question or an accounting question, it's easier for me to get the answer than for them to get it, and probably a lot more cost effective for me to get it.
And cost and time, because now you know how to utilize your resources. I mean, that's what you do.
Right, but something that could take them a week to research or, making several phone calls to call the right person could take me 5 minutes. So it's worth their time and effort to just reach out to us and have us do the legwork.
I'm really curious, do you know how you guys ended up within the Toledo Chamber?
We've been a part of the Toledo Chamber since the SBDC existed in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
So it's been over 35 years.
But it's a unique, I would think, when I first started talking and having this conversation with our Jill over here at AA Solutions, I was thinking that you guys kind of derived out of the chamber at first. And I didn't realize, I think, how far reaching, it actually is. And there is this realization I'm coming to that there's so much help for small businesses out there. And yet most of them feel like they're floating on an island by themselves because they either, one, like you said, don't reach out because they're scared to ask for help, or they kind of got picked up in that idea there is no help because of the people who don't want to ask, and so they just chug along and try to make the best of.
I feel like there's not a great roadmap to show you all the different resources, but there's actually quite a lot of resources for entrepreneurs in our city. So if they reach out to any one of us, we can help direct them to the right resource depending on what their needs are. But there are a lot of resources for small businesses. And the chamber has just always felt like the Small Business Development Center fit because we are a membership-based organization. And if we're not here to help small businesses, then what else are they doing? The purpose for the chamber is to help their members, and they can utilize our services whether they're a chamber member or not. But the chamber offers a lot of other services. We, advocacy. We have the Toledo brand. We have Epic, which helps with, what am I thinking of? Epic is our young professionals division, and then we have an internship program somewhere in the city. There's just a lot of different ways in which the chamber helps small businesses.
I feel like I'm seeing a lot of stuff, too, that the chamber does, whether it's through Epic or some of the other things like events they put on. Right before the pandemic, I think the year before, we did the T-Town Dash.
That's with the interns every year. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
That was so much fun. I mean, getting to know our downtown area, and it seems like it's so much more vibrant than when I moved up here, and people are so excited to go downtown. Our neighbors just opened up a place down there. I'm hearing more businesses moving down there, or restaurants popping up. And it's kind of becoming its own like hotspot. People know what they want in a downtown area now. Right. So now, with you, do you guys connect to like other area chambers or try to from the small business side of it?
Not from the Small Business Development Center. I mean, we have, like I said, another 30 centers in the state of Ohio, so I can connect them to another small business development center. Typically, it's not necessary for me to connect them to another chamber.
Yeah.
It depends on what they're looking for. A lot of the smaller chambers, like a Sylvania chamber or a Perrysburg chamber, they're going to work just within their community unless, I mean, I've never worked with the Sylvania chamber, but they're focused on building up the city of Sylvania, right?
Yeah.
Where the Toledo Regional Chamber, we have a much larger reach, right? It's not just Sylvania or just Perrysburg, but it's the whole region. Which is kind of like the Small Business Development Center. We cover both Lucas and Wood counties, so we have a larger reach. But if somebody was in another county, I could connect them to that Small Business Development Center. Or if they're in another county and they want to come up to us, I can still work with them.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I was wondering from like the perspective if somebody came to one of those other chambers within one of these two counties, how easy it would be for them to connect to you from there if they wanted to.
Yes, they can definitely connect to us no matter where they're at.
That's good. That's good to hear. I'm from Sylvania, so that's why I went.
Yeah, no, you do not have to be in the city of Toledo to work with us. I don't know how much the other chambers refer to our program, but you can be in anywhere in the region and work with the Small Business Development Center. And I have some clients outside our area. Somehow I ended up working with a whole lot of child care centers. So sometimes I get outside our little Lucas and Wood County to assist in child care.
Okay. So what is, for you, is there like a huge difference with the different types of business, whether it's a restaurant or it's a child care center or it's another type of business, maybe doing like clothing or something like that? Is there a large difference between how you work with those different types of owners?
Not really. It all starts in the same place, establishing what type of business they want to be, whether it's a sole prop, LLC, S Corp, making sure they have their EIN number, getting them a business bank account, working on a break-even analysis so that they understand how many customers they need every single day they're open in order to pay the bills. The analysis is still along the same lines. Obviously, if they're an online business, you're going to have different needs than if they're a brick and mortar. But the starting point is usually the same. The way you would market them or help them create their budget is drastically different.
Okay, I was wondering. And then do you guys have a lot of, I'm curious about like how many online business owners you've worked with, just because when I picture it, I do picture the brick and mortar. I think that's just like, the cliche startup.
I mean, we have quite a few online retailers that I've worked with. I helped a makeup company start and they're completely virtual, but there was still so much legwork. I mean, they had their R&D facility, they had to find their packaging company, they had to find their fulfillment company, and we went to all the different locations here in Toledo to make sure everything was locally sourced, but we were still going from fulfillment center to fulfillment center, trying to figure out where their product would be stored, how you handle shipping, all of that fun stuff.
Wow. Yeah, thinking about all that, the background of that kind of thing.
I mean, it just depends on where they're starting. If they're on Etsy, they might have all their product delivered to their home. But if they're selling on Amazon, chances are their sales are too high to keep everything at home and for them to be processing everything themselves. So it just depends on where they're at in the process.
Yeah, that is a very interesting thing. And then as they grow, something that might have been based out of home might have to grow into something else.
Right. So we do help them figure out where that transition point is. Where in your budget can you now afford for somebody else to take on that process?
That's very interesting. And I'm sure you see a lot of people that go from like one or two people running a business to start to grow and take on employees. What is it like walking somebody through that stage?
That's can be a handful because you're going from having owners to now employees. So understanding, are you comfortable taking on payroll? What does that look like? Are you hiring a payroll company? Do you understand workers' comp? Because in the state of Ohio, it's required on all employees. Making sure that you know all the different ways in which you have to support that employee.
So with walking through the newer part of the process and things like that, what are those interactions? Like if somebody comes to you and they're like that very beginning napkin phase, for how often do you typically work with them? Are you meeting weekly? Are you talking almost daily?
It totally depends on the client. I mean, we have the capacity to do whatever they need. It just depends on the client. Some people, if they're still at that napkin idea, chances are they still have a 9 to 5 job. So it could depend on their work schedule, on our client load. Right now, since we're seeing probably double what we're used to, every day might be a little bit much, but it just depends on what they need help with. And there's usually time, I call it for homework. You know, when they meet with us, we give them a list of things that they need to do. So chances of meeting every single day are probably a bit much, but weekly is definitely doable.
Okay, that's very interesting just because obviously, like, somebody who's already running a business and feels like a chicken with their head cut off, that everything is crashing and burning. And I think the biggest excuse you might hear, I don't have time for that.
Right.
It sounds like, the time that they meet with you and even maybe the homework that you get, they're going to have time for it. It's not actually like this huge thing to do a bit of the background or at least get the ball rolling and realize where you need to do the work so that you're not running around like a chicken with your head
I
cut
was
off.
going to say, hopefully it saves them time and gives them a focal point so that they understand the process and where they need to go in order to get where they want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. It always makes it takes me back to my middle school years where I was very bullheaded and I was like, I can do it myself. So that's what it makes me think of is like back then. But the truth is we carry that bullheaded with us like throughout our
Through
life.
life.
Yeah. And it is tend to be your pride and joy when you create a startup, when you're running a business and things like that. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of people where their pride and joy is at risk within the last year because things pivoted so drastically that even if they weren't handling like a supply crisis or something like that, just the large changes in how they had to deliver their service or just completely rethink their strategy were probably really tough to handle.
Being able to pivot is probably the number one benefit. You know, if a company was able to pivot, they probably survived the pandemic more than their neighbor. Because the people who thought they could just keep continuing to do things the way they've always done are struggling.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, too, we see businesses that think that they can just keep with the same original strategy for the entire duration tend to hit a point where they start to struggle anyways, whether it's caused by an external factor or not, because your customer changes and technology changes, and now the world is so social media based that it's like, okay, people are seeing different things. It's a really huge impact on customers when their worlds can change overnight because something happens in a country that's completely like it's an ocean away, but it impacts people's thoughts. It impacts the conversations that are happening. Sometimes it impacts what they want. Like there's people who go vegan all of a sudden because of things that they find out and learn on social media. So what happens if you're a company that sells a lot of meat and most of your customers are on social media? So it's very interesting. How do you see, from your perspective, how do you see businesses impacted by changing technology and things like that?
We saw in the pandemic a lot of businesses struggle to apply for any grants or any assistance because they didn't have technology. They didn't know how to turn on a computer. They didn't have a computer. Trying to teach them how to apply for anything on their smartphone. Trying to teach them how to turn on a computer if we gave them one. There were a lot of businesses impacted because they didn't know how to apply for any of the assistance available. That, or they're used to taking a shoebox to their accountant at the end of the year. They don't keep internal financial statements. And so when they needed to apply for any of the assistance, they couldn't do so because they didn't have financial documents that were required for applying for those types of grants.
And those are probably, are those typically like the older businesses that have been around, or do you see people starting off that way now?
No, there are businesses that start today that don't ever consider how they're going to do their bookkeeping.
Wow.
Or why it's necessary.
Like logically, I know that people, like it's a spot that they'll forget because they don't have training in that spot, but like it's so crazy to think of not having that side of it down. Like,
well, you get, like, for example, an artist who's worried about selling their piece of art. They're not worried about how to track its expenses and how to figure out, I mean, they put a value on that piece of artwork. They're not comparing it to somebody else to establish, am I charging enough for this? Am I covering all my costs? Am I tracking those costs? So, I mean, it doesn't matter how old or young you are or what industry you're in. There's always people out there that are not necessarily doing all the business side of owning a business.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think of my friend with her crochet business again. She's actually very good at thinking, okay, how much time is this going to take? What are the materials? Things like that, because she tends to do it on a order by order basis. People ask for specific things. She goes out, gets the supplies, and makes it. And then it'll cost more than like if you buy it from a shop on Etsy that's pre-made 3 or 4 or 20 of the same bralette. They can get the cost down because they bought the yarn in bulk. And then they're selling it to multiple people. So she does them custom, which people like, but then people forget custom orders.
Equal custom cost.
Yeah, exactly. And she'll get things like she knows the types, like certain types of things are going to be about the same amount every time. And she does it based on the discount she gets as a teacher and all this other stuff because she has a day job. But, thinking of even that, of someone who's maybe a little more diligent about it, probably doesn't think when she starts of this actually becoming something she could do full time. But some people do take that hobby full time and they just keep doing it the same way, I'm sure.
Right. Sometimes it's hard to get you out of, well, I've always done it this way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, isn't that the big poison mindset? It's like, well, I've always done it this way. Okay, but the world's not always that way.
Well, and you're doing it differently.
Yeah.
Before you were doing maybe 1 a week, and now you're doing 1 or 5 a day. So you need to track that in a different manner than when this was a hobby. Because as a hobby, you maybe weren't paying taxes on that, or you weren't tracking it as a revenue source. And especially when people start to consider this their full-time job and they might need some form of capital. They might need a loan for something, a new piece of equipment, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. If you're not tracking your expenses and doing your financial statements, how do you prove to the bank you're making enough money for them to loan you any kind of capital?
Exactly. And well, then a lot of people, I'm sure, too, will see that they do it at the break even when it's a hobby because they don't need the extra money. But
it's for fun.
It's for fun, but then they want to maintain some of the same people who bought from them, but still give family free pieces or free whatever they're doing. But now they need money in there, like they need money to sustain the business. They need profit to keep growing and going and paying themselves at the end of the night. So there's a whole lot of elements to it that, like, especially in that growth phase, make the game change.
Well, we even saw a restaurant one time who was trying to figure out why they weren't making any money. And when we looked at their expenses, we saw that their food costs were at like 80%. And we couldn't figure out why. Because for a restaurant, your food costs should only be about 30%. Until we realized, like, if you sat there and watched their customers, they were allowing their family to eat every single meal there every day without paying anything. Nothing. For the cost of the food. So we were like, well, it's okay if you want to help out friends and family, but you need to at least charge them what it costs you to prepare that meal. And even if you're discounting your personal labor, which you shouldn't do, it's like you at least have to cover your own food costs because now you're cutting into you're basically paying to feed your family because they're not paying at least the food costs.
Mm-hmm. Feeding your family becomes a restaurant expense.
Yes, it's a huge restaurant expense. It kept them from earning any money in the business.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, it's always hard to tell family, like, you have to pay.
This is not a free service.
It has to sustain itself. I have to sustain me and my employees. But, like, yeah. And then I've also seen, like, the flip side where, okay, they've gotten the cost down. They do charge, I've worked at a restaurant where, okay, you get 50% off when you're working and 30% off when you're not working as an employee. But, no more than that, except for maybe, like, the little condiments and things. That are a little easier to go by. But then the turnaround becomes, okay, are you bringing in the customers?
Is somebody coming with you to eat that meal?
Yeah. Because I've seen somewhere they've got this big menu, and it's super cool because they have a big menu and you can choose lots of things. But then, which will go in. Is it
cost efficient?
Yeah. Is it cost efficient to have all those ingredients, all the different types of food, for your staff to know how to make that much food? Because sometimes they don't actually understand comprehensively what they're doing. They're just tossing things together, so the food's not as good, which means you get more complaints and less customers returning. And I've seen a couple people do that, which isn't sustainable in the long term. They get some loyal customers, and loyal customers keep aging, and they have no incoming customers. So I've seen that too. It's very interesting, but I'm sure you, from your perspective, are going through all of those phases with all kinds of different people.
Well, it's amazing because, like at a restaurant, a menu matters. You have to get certain health department approval for your storage and for your menu. And, there's a lot of different obstacles. So making your menu large doesn't just benefit you because you think you're appealing to a wide variety of people. There are obstacles. Like you said, there's more food you have to keep on hand. There's more things you have to get approved by the health department. There's more for your staff to be trained on. There's always more.
Yep. And then if you want to serve liquor.
Well, that just threw in a whole new complication right there.
It's kind of funny because it's like one little element, which everybody thinks a restaurant comes with liquor, right? You got wine or you got something or another, or you got a bar attached, and you're like a whole new ball game when it comes to being a business owner.
Right.
So, all right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up because we've really talked about what you do and what the Small Business Development Center can do. What is the best way, if somebody is listening or watching this, that they can reach out to your team?
The Toledo Regional Chamber of Commerce has a website, toledochamber.com. You can find us on there. My personal email address would be jill.badger@toledochamber.com.
All right, and we'll tag that in all of our stuff so that if you want to reach out to Jill, you can. We've got a couple more episodes for this mini season coming up where we're going to break down some of the common things that people in a starter business or some of the earlier phases in their business might face and that you should be considering. So thank you and have a great rest of your week. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.